Good evening, everyone.
Kavod Harav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Okay.
Kavod Harav, I think we're still on Bet Yosef, no?
Yes, I think you're right.
We were in Tav Kuf Yud Het. I think
Yes.
that's the 518, no? Is that?
Yes. Right. So I think we're here. It says here like this. Mash Katav Rabbeinu, right? Regarding what the Torah said, the Mafteach, regarding a key, Shesoger bo cholin, right? That he's locking up the food with that. She'erel enichol bebayit, so he's afraid to leave it at home without locking it. Because if it wasn't for that point, it would be carrying for no purpose. ומשמע דמבטיח שסוגר בו כלים שאין בהם צורך. So it says, implies that a key that he locks up the utensils, it doesn't really have a need, right? Hayom Klal, the day at all. Even if he's afraid, to leave it in the house, it will be forbidden to take it out, carry it. אבל בהגאות סמ"ק, סימן רפ"ב, when it says in this book, right, כתוב דמבטיח תיבה שאין בה אלא מאוד, כיוון דליבו דואג משום פסדה חשוב צורך קצת. So it says, right, that if you're taking out, let's say, the keys, right, which are, for a safe, where you have the money there, whatever. So even that you're allowed to take out. Why is that? Even though you can't use money on Yom Tov, but since you're worried about it, so that just alleviates your worry. So therefore, that's why it's allowed to do it. Yeah, okay. So then, וכן כתוב גם כן בסימן קצ"ד, he also says in this chapter, וכן כתב רבנו ירוחם. So it says, that what says in Yerucham, Rabbi Yerucham, שרבנו פרץ, that this rabbi התיר להביא מחזורים מבית הכנסת. So, right, he allowed to bring these prayer books, right, from the synagogue, אפילו שלא היו צריכים להם עד מוצאי של יום טוב, even though they don't really need it until after the holiday. לפי שדרים בין הגויים, why? Because they dwell amongst the non-Jews, right? כדאמרינן בירושלמי, like we said in Yerushalmi, שלא יהיה ליבו דואג עליו. So what does that mean? They're afraid, of theft, whatever, vandalism, right? You know how things are, right? There's all kinds of things going on. So because of that, right, they lock it up and they take the key with them. Okay, so they allow that. והמורדכי כתב כמה דבצע, right, says this מורדכי, שמותר לישא מחזורים לבית הכנסת. He also says, right, that you're allowed to take prayer books to the synagogue. It says also, same thing applies to return them home as well. Even though you don't really need them, right, at home at all. You don't use them at home, right? But nevertheless, right, because you're worried about it, right? That's the reason why we allow you. Even though Ula doesn't really seem to include this kind of a thing, right, in his leniency, whatever, right, Mishum Delo Matne b'matnitin doesn't say, because it doesn't say that in the Braita. Haram. Afterwards, he writes in the name of the Ram, "V'lachazir Sfarim lebeta lebait b'yom tov asur." So then he says, right, that the Ram says that it's forbidden to do that, to bring these prayer books to the house. Unless you want to learn with those books, right? You want to learn something there, then it's okay, obviously, right? But if you're not learning anything with them, so you're just doing it, to guard them, whatever. So there, he doesn't allow that. So we see, right, that there's two different opinions going on here. Right? According to one opinion, you're allowed to carry things, the keys, right, just to guard stuff, that you're worried it's going to get stolen. But there's another opinion that says no, you can only, right, to carry keys for something which you need that day, right, some item which you need. Okay, so then it goes on. מה שכתב רבנו בשם רבנו שמואל, זה דווקא לכתוב בידו, אבל ברצועה כדי לאכול לא. Right, so then he brings this opinion, right, the Torah. But this rabbi, Rabbeinu Shemuel, he says that's only to take it right with his hand, but but if you're doing it with some kind of a strap, whatever it is, so right then it's not allowed. Why? So he says the reason is because it's like weekday kind of a activity, right? Yeah. So in other words, what he means to say is that probably they had some kind of contraption where they put large amounts of books in there, whatever, and they would just it would like put them all together in one bundle. So that's more like weekday, in the sense that you're carrying a lot of them, so it's heavy, so it's weekday activity, right? That's what he's trying to say. Okay, good. So then he says, right, Chen Katav Samak. That's what it says also in the Samak. וכך כתב רבינו רוחם, also רבינו רוחם, בשם רבינו פרץ, this rabbi, והריף כתב בית הלל סברי בתוך שהותרה הוצאת לצורך, הוצאה נמי שלא לצורך, פירוש לצורך. So, right, the Rif says like this, since these, according to Bet Hillel, right, that we paskin like Bet Hillel, as we mentioned yesterday, right, so since it was permitted to do this for something which has no need, so it says it's also permitted to do something, I'm sorry, just the opposite. Since we're permitted to do this for something which has a need, that means it's also permitted to do something which has no need, right? So now we, right, expands on that. What does that mean? So he says, right? So what does that mean that you need it? You need it for eating, right? And what about when there's no need? Right? So he says we're talking about like a child or a lulav or Sefer Torah, right? Sefer Torah. You don't need these things really. So he says the same thing also applies to utensils. But he says when it comes to stones, right, or things like that, Bet Hillel asrei, right? So even Bet Hillel would forbid that. So why is that? Because these things have no use. So why do you want to carry it for? What? So he says that's halakha. Okay. So in other words, according to the Rif, basically, right, what we're saying is that something which has really no need at all, right, in any way, shape, or form, so that you shouldn't carry on Yom Tov, something like that. Okay, so then he goes on, והראש כתב דברי הריף, נראה שהוא כתב דברי הריף, נראה שהוא מפרשם על פי שיטתו. So the Rosh comments on the words of the Rif. He says it seems like he's going according to his method here, methodology, whatever, right? וכן דעת הר"ן, also the Ran, שכתב אבל אבנים וכיוצא בהם אפילו בית הלל עשה. So he also says, right, the Ran, same thing, that when it comes to like things like stones, so there, even Bet Hillel would not allow that, right? So what do you need a stone for? That's the idea. פירוש דחי אמינן בתוך שהותרה שרוצה לצורך לשנות לצורך, היינו דווקא שיש בצורך קצת. So he says, right, that how do we explain it like this? We explain like this, right? We say that what it says in the Talmud, that it's allowed even for when it's not a need. It means there is a little bit of a need there, but not really much, But if there's totally no need, so that the Talmud did not allow, according to this opinion. Okay, good. Let's go on. Kigon katan lemulo, right? For instance, a child, to circumcise, or to tailo, right? To mechutz, or to take him out to to play outside. Deika mishum oneg yom tov, because that's like enjoyment of yom tov. Or sefer Torah likot, right? Or a sefer Torah to read with it. Umash katav arif, and that what your Rif said. The din kelim gavna, that this also applies to utensils in the same way. Namihu sheish b'hem tzorech liyom ktsat. That also, right, also applies the same thing there. That it has to have a little bit of a need, at least, something. But again, right, if they don't have any need whatsoever, so that's a very different story, right? Asur meloked kavanim. So he's lashed. Okay. So what will be an example? Right? Again, stones, right? Right, same thing. Since you don't need it at all, there's no reason for you to carry it around. So he says that's the conclusion, right? Of the later authorities about Medivra Rashi, but he says from Rashi though, Zal nearly deotzat kelim afal gam shneim b'hem tzorech l'yom klal kol she'eno motzi otam לצורך מחר אפשר באף דברי הריף מתאים כן בזה תלוי בדקדוק סוגיית הגמרא כתבתי בחידושי עד כאן השנה, right? So he says over here, but there's also another opinion, right? Which is like Rashi. So Rashi seems to say that even if you have no need whatsoever, it's allowed. And he says even you can interpret the Rif like that, to agree with Rashi. Okay. Very good. So who was this? This was the Ran, right? So who wrote this? Okay, very good. Let's go on. So now he brings the Rambam here, right? והרמב"ם כתב פרק א', כל המלאכה שחייבים עליה בשבת, אם עשה אותה ביום טוב שלא לצורך אכילה לוקה, חוץ מן ההוצאה שמרשות לרשות, והעברה שמתוך התורה רוצה לא לצורך אכילה, מותר שלא לצורך אכילה. ולפיכך מותר ביום טוב להוציא קטן בספר תורה או מבטיח כי יוצא באלו, מרשות הרשות, כתב הרב מגיד. So the Rambam, right, brings this halacha over here that we just mentioned. And he pretty much says the same thing as, I guess you could say the Rif, right? Same as the Rif. So then he brings the commentary there, right? Ketav Ramagid says Ramagid Asikna beGemara that Bet Hillel Sabre. We concluded in Talmud that Bet Hillel holds Aminan Mitoch Sheperesh Rashi. So he says because we say that it's allowed, right? Even something which is not a need. Rashi explains that about Torah muteret degamre. So he says, right, from the Torah, it will be allowed altogether. This kind of a thing. On Yom Tov. B'chol davar, in any way, shape, or form. Ela be'otzat avanim, because it says, but when it comes to things which have no need whatsoever, like stones, as we said, right? So there, the rabbis decreed not to do it. Mishum tircha, because why? What do they care, by the way, if you carry that stone? What does it bother them, the rabbis? So he says the reason is because of tircha. What does tircha mean? Exertion, right? Too much exertion, Don't sweat it, right? It's Yom Tov, like take it easy, Well, that's what he means to say, right? We don't want you breaking a sweat for nothing. וכן נראה מן ההלכות, ההלכות he says also, וזה דעת רבנו ולא הוצרך להזכיר איסור דבריהם ברצת אמנים, לפי שכתב בפרק זה, שכל שאסור לטלטלו בשבת, אסור לטלטלו ביום טוב, ולצורך האכילה, ויש בזה שיטה אחרת לקצת מפרשים האחרונים, שהם סוברים שלא הותרו אלא ולא לצורך כלל, אלא אם כן יש בו צורך היום קצת, קטן ולולב. So he brings the other opinion also, right? That there has to be a little bit of a need there, If there isn't, then it's not allowed. אבל כשאין בו צורך מצווה ולא לצורך אידיוט, ביומו כלל, so he's telling you, right, if there's no need whatsoever, whether it's a mitzvah or some other issue, a practical issue, so like stones, right, again, right? Everybody's talking about stones tonight. Right? So he's lashed, right? Even according to Bet Hillel, it says, that's the end of the language there. Okay, very nice. So good. Let's go on. So he says, and the other opinion that he brought there, right, in the name of the later authorities, was the same as the Rosh, basically. Okay, good. So right now he gets to the bottom line, right? Nitty gritty over here, right? It says, what's halakha? כיוון שהרב מגיד סובר שדעת הריף כדעת הרמב"ם ורש"י וגם מרן כתב כשדברי הריף מתאים כדברי רש"י וטעמה דמסתבר הוא, right, הרמב"ם בשיטת הריף רבו אמרה הכי נקטינן. Oh, there you go, right? So this is the halakha, right? So let's go over that again, right? One more time. Make sure we got every word over here. So what is the halakha? So he says, since the Rav Magid, right? He holds that the Rif and the Rambam are the same. And also Rashi. And also the Ran said, right, that also the Rif also seems to go like Rashi. So in other words, what it comes out here is that basically they all seem to be the same, right? What does that mean? The Rif, the Rambam, Rashi, right? All these rabbis. But Talmud Mistaberhu. And this also, he says, it's logical as well, right? There's logic going on here. So what does that mean? That it's logical to say that the Rambam is going like the Rif, right? Why is that, by the way? Why is it so logical? So the answer is because the Rambam, right, was indirectly a Talmid of the Rif, So therefore, right, it makes sense that they're going in the same direction. As I already mentioned to you guys, right, they say the Rambam was a Talmid of the Rif, But the truth is they never met each other, So what does that mean? That there was one rabbi, right, who learned from the Rif and taught to the Rambam. So he was indirectly, he was a Talmid of the Rif. The Rambam, right? Okay, now bonus question, right? Extra credit. Who was that rabbi, right? Who learned from the Rif and taught to the Rambam? Anybody know? bonus, extra credit. Okay, so I'll tell you, right? It was the Rimigash, right? The Rimigash was the one who learned from the Rif and taught to the Rambam. There you go. Okay, now you're all set. So let's go on. So he says, right, that everybody seems to agree one thing. That, right, that what? That you shouldn't carry something which has no need of a mitzvah, and also and it has also no practical need either, right? So don't just carry stuff in your pocket, you know what I mean? your weekday, right, leftovers, don't carry that on Yom Tov. you know, like your receipt from the dry cleaners, what I mean? Like, what are you carrying that around for? What are you for? Take it out, right? And put it somewhere, right? Whatever. I don't think anybody needs a receipt for the dry cleaners, on Yom Tov, right? So what do you need it for? What are you carrying around for? But when it comes to keys, right? There you do need it. Why? Because you don't want to leave the door unlocked, right? You don't want to get robbed, right? Pillaged, whatever, right? You don't want that. So you'll sleep much better, right? If your door is locked, and you got the keys. So therefore, that's allowed. So that reminds me, by the way, I feel sorry for some of you guys, not all of you, but some of you, that you live in a place where there's no eruv, because you can't carry on Shabbat anything. So that's what's a recommended way of doing things, right? What you got to do is move to a Jewish neighborhood, right? Religious neighborhood. The time has come, you got to move into a neighborhood where there's an eruv there, so you can live like a normal Jew. Otherwise, you can't carry, you can't do this, can't do that. How can you live like that on Shabbat? You can't take your keys to the shul. What are you gonna do? So right? I don't have to tell you guys, right? Some of the rabbis who do conversions, they require you to move, before you convert. You know what I mean? I don't require that, but what I do is I recommend you should move after I convert you. Then I tell you, right? Please move. So this way you can live a normal life, right? That's the way it goes. Okay. The problem is, some people cannot afford to move because it's too expensive, whatever, So what can you do? It is what it is. What can you do? But if you can afford it, you really should move. Go, live in a place where there's an eruv, where you have, a synagogue there. You can go, and pray, right? You don't have to drive there. On Shabbat, right? You can, you have, right? You have a restaurant, kosher restaurant there. You can eat somewhere. Get something to eat. These kinds of things, whatever. Grocery store, basically the things you need, right? As a Jew, whatever, right? To live your life. Also, it's good to have a mikveh there, right? All kinds of things like that, right? You shouldn't be too far from mikveh either, especially if you're married, right? Okay, I'm not going to get into that too much, but you should be, if a person is married, a woman, right? She should be walking distance from a mikveh. Otherwise, what is she going to do? If she has to go to the mikveh on Shabbat, what is she going to do? Not so good, right? Okay. All right, very good. So let's go on a little bit. So it says like this: Ela deleshitat achronim asur midoraita, right? It says, but according to the later authorities, it's forbidden from the Torah. Uleshitat Rambam, but according to Rambam, eno asur ela midrabanan. It's only rabbinical, it's prohibition. וכך נראה שהוא דת Rashi, right? Also Rashi seems to go like the Rambam. Ela שמלשון הר"ן, but it says according to the language of the Ran, נראה דלרש"י נמי מדרבנן. Even according to Rashi, right? It seems like it's lo mitzar, right? It's not even forbidden from the rabbis. In other words, it's permitted altogether. Tam lama amru mitoch she'utra le'otzat l'tzorech l'tzorech katabti b'siman tav tzadikei. Right. So it says, I already wrote the reasoning for this, right? In a different chapter, right? Which chapter is that? 495. All right. I think we already passed that. Okay, so let's go on. Yerushalmi Perek Kama de Betzah. So it says in Yerushalmi, right? In Masechet Betzah. Rabbi Shemuel ברבי יוסף ברבי בון הבו מתענה מארץ לארץ. אמר רבי זרע תומר רבי יוסף נמה דהבה איסטניס בריא הווה מיני מינך. So now, right, we'll explain what this Gemara means, right? כתב רן, says the Ran, פרק כמה דבצע, שנראה מלשון הריף, שהוא סובר ביום טוב לא בעניין עירובי חצרות, כלל, אבל הרשב"א, right? So he says, right, that it seems like the Rif learns that when it comes to Yom Tov, right, we don't need to make Eruv Chatzerot. So what is Eruv Chatzerot? Do you guys know what that means? So what that means is like this, right, that you make an Eruv for like a courtyard, you know, where there are several homes there. And this way everybody can carry in that courtyard. So he says that regarding that, that you don't need it on Yom Tov. You don't need an Eruv. And by the way, the same thing also applies to our Eruvs, right? You know, that we have in our cities. You don't need that for Yom Tov. Same thing. Same idea. Okay, so רשב"א כתב לכלים שאין בהם צורך ליום כלל, אסור להוציאם מחצר לחצר ולא עירוב. But the Rashba says, right, if it's something which has no need to carry that stuff, so there he says, there then you need an עירוב. So he says, just like there's a prohibition from the Torah to carry from a private domain to a public domain, also he says from one courtyard to another, there's also rabbinical prohibition. So he says, therefore you do need an eruv. And that which we said, right, in a different place, different chapter, it says over there, that we do make, right, eruv. Because over there, it implies in that Gemara, you don't need, right, the eruv at all, which seems to contradict the words of the Rashba, right? So he says that's talking about where you have some utensils which have some need, you know, on Yom Tov to carry them, even though it's a slight need. הן צריכות עירוב אף במיעוטן, לא הזקיקו לערב בשריין ולא עירוב. Right, so basically he says, right, that the rabbis didn't decree to make an eruv on Yom Tov. Why is that? Because it's not really required in most cases, you know, even so therefore, you know, they just canned it all together. The Divi Arif Matin Ken, so he says the words of the Rif also seem to indicate that. Shemosh Katavti, like I wrote, he says, Ella, however, Sheesh B'Gemara Ochacha B'Svat Rashba. So he says, but you know, on the other hand, there's also a place in the Talmud where it supports the Rashba. Interesting. So you have a machloket here, right, regarding that. What's the machloket? Again, right, one more time, to reiterate. The machloket is, do we need an eruv on Yom Tov, right, or not? So according to Rashba, it seems like we do need it for some things, you know. But according to the other opinion, it seems like we don't need it at all. And if I'm not mistaken, that's the halakha, you know, the other opinion, right? Okay, so anyway, Perek Bet Betzah. So it says second Perek Betzah, Tzet Amud Aleph. כתב הכלים שאין בהם צורך כלים כלל, אפשר דחי יחיד דחי מפיק להוא ברשות היחיד ברשות הרבים, אבל הדאורייתא, אך אינם להפוקינו מחצר לחצר, ולא עירוב איסור מדרבנן, או אפשר, שכיוון שרוב ההוצאות ביום טוב אינן צריכות עירוב, אף מפני מיעוטן לא הצריכו, כבר כתבתי זה בפרק כמה מיהו, so he reiterates this thing again, right, from a different vantage point, but the same idea, right, which is that, we're contemplating this question, right, do we require an eruv on Yom Tov or not? We're going through the different possibilities, right? Maybe yes, maybe no. Okay, so it says, וכבר כתבתי זה בפרק כמה מיהו, לקה ספקה, שאם עירב מהנה לעירוב ולהוציא מחצר לחצר. But it says, right, regardless, right, of what we just said, right, if you did make the eruv, he says, then it does, it does allow you to carry from one courtyard to another. In other words, even something that which we don't need at all. אף דבר שאין בו צורך להיום כלל. ובלבד שיהיה תורת כלי עליו, as long as it's considered to be a utensil somewhat, whatever. כמו שהוא דינו בטלטול. Just like we say regarding the issue of carrying things, just, in the house, whatever. עד כאן השונו. That's the end of it. Okay. וכן יראה מדברי מרדכי, that's what it says from Mordechai also, שאם עירב מהנה, that if he did make the eruv, it does work. So what does that mean, it does work? It works to allow you to carry anything you want, right? Even something which has no need whatsoever. Okay, good. So now we'll see the Shulchan Aruch, right? After we finish this lengthy Bet Yosef, it was quite lengthy there. I think it took us about a half hour or more. I don't know. God knows. God knows how long it took us. All right. I think it was more than a half hour. Okay, so anyway, right, let's go to Shulchan Aruch, see what's going on there. Now we'll sum up everything, right? So many things going on here. Sum up everything. Here we go. Oh, I think I have to bring it up because it's a new chapter. New chapter. Bring it up. Let's bring it up. Okay. So it says here in the Shulchan Aruch, Aleph, מתוך שהותרה ההוצאה לצורך אכילה, הותר שלא לצורך, right? So he says, since it's allowed to carry something which is needed for consumption, it's also allowed for not consumption, right? There's no need. כגון קטן ולולב בספר תורה וכלים, right? So what are the examples? Like, carrying a child, right? Or a lulav, sefer Torah, kelim, right? Utensils. So what does that mean? There's no really big need here, it's just, it's a small need. Right? So it says Rama, Aga, Asrichim lo ksat, if it needs a little bit, as we said, right? Or shemityare shelo ignovo, or ignore, right? Or let's say he's afraid the item shouldn't be stolen, right? As we already mentioned. Or sharp seda, or other kinds of losses, right? Okay. Vandalism, right? As we said, right? Vandalism. Okay. So you get the point. So continues the Shulchan Aruch, Aval avanim kirotze behen asur. But it says, as we said, right, you're not allowed to carry stones, right? Because there's no need for that whatsoever. So it says the Rama here, ומותר לשחוק בכדור, אפילו ברשות הרבים, אגב שאינו טיול, אלא טיול בעלמא, right? So he says, right, what you are allowed to do is to play with a ball, even in a public domain, he says, even though it's just for, for sport, right, for fun, It's very interesting. Okay, I'm a little bit pausing, when I hear this. Why? Because the truth is, right, that when it comes to Shabbat, right, we recommend that people shouldn't play ball on Shabbat, except children, right? Children we allow. But when it comes to adults, we don't recommend this. on Shabbat. You know why that is? Anybody know why?
Taking
So
time away from Torah study.
I'm sorry.
Taking time away from Torah study.
Yeah, well, looks like you got it. You know me too well, right? It always comes down to that with me, right? It's always the bottom line. So okay, right. She knows me too well. Okay, right. So anyway, right. That's always my excuse for everything. So all right. So let's explain that, right? Expand on it a little bit. So there's a Gemara, right? It says there that the town Betar, or Beter, right? Whatever was destroyed because of the sin that they played ball there on Shabbat, right? So, right, you see from there that it's not really a good thing to play ball on Shabbat, right? You don't want your town being destroyed, right? So, so therefore, it's a little bit surprising, right, to hear this now, right? That he allows you to do this on Yom Tov, right? So now here's the thing, right? Why don't we want you playing ball on Shabbat, right? So as you said, the reason is because you should be doing better things on Shabbat, right? Spiritual things, learning Torah, right? Things like that, right? Spiritual prayers, doing right oneg Shabbat, right? All the good things that you do on Shabbat, But right, playing with a ball is like kind of like silly, It goes against the purpose of Shabbat. Right? So therefore, right, the rabbis very much discourage this kind of activity, right? So that's one thing, right? The other thing is that we do allow it for children, and the reason is because they're kids. I mean, so what do you expect them to do? To sit and learn all day? They can't do that. Children need to play. It's their nature, so they enjoy it also, right? A lot. Because they're kids, Who didn't enjoy playing when he was a kid? I don't know any kid like that. So, all right. Even a nerdy guy like me, right? I used to play when I was a kid. What can I do, right? Even a nerd like me. So, right, whatever. It is what it is, right? But so with kids, it's okay. There's no problem with that. Keep them busy. It's better that way, right? It's just the opposite, right? On the contrary. So now the question comes down to this, right? If we discourage playing ball so much on Yom Tov, on Shabbat, then how is it allowed to do it on Yom Tov, right? That's the question. So let's see, right? Maybe the Mishnah Berurah explains this here. What the secret is behind this revolutionary idea here. So he brings here, right, the Maharshal, who seems to, right, agree with me, right, or I agree with him, right, whatever. That really, it should be only allowed for children, right, not for adults, for the reasons that we mentioned, right. Yeah. So it is what it is. So, bottom line is like this, right? We don't recommend you should play ball on Shabbat or Yom Tov, right? Do something spiritual, right? Learn Torah, do some prayers, right? Or have a nice meal, whatever it is, right? That you're doing, all those good things that you do on Yom Tov and Shabbat. But playing ball, how does that fit in? How does that fit into the picture? But for your kids, it's okay, right? That's all right, no problem, right? We let them because they enjoy it really, So it's for them. It's like oneg Shabbat, oneg Yom Tov. It's written in the Shulchan Aruch, by the way. What I'm telling you. Anyway, right? So yeah, that's the story. Now the question is like this, right? Since we got into this discussion, Right? When we talk about kids, right? Until which age do we allow them to play ball? And then we tell them, you're too old already, right? You're over the hill. Stop playing.
At least bar mitzvah, right?
And he's right. You would think, right, that it's bar mitzvah, right? Because that's when he's already he's considered to be an adult, right? But the truth is that if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, in the laws of Shabbat, over there you're going to see, right, that it's not exactly like that. So why is that? I'll explain to you why, right? It says in Shulchan Aruch, right, that even children, even like, youngsters, right, like, teenagers, they also enjoy playing ball, But how many boys do you know, right, that don't like to play a little basketball, right? Even though they're, 17, 18 years old, right? They still enjoy it, right? So that's why, we allow them to play until the age where, they enjoy it. In other words, I guess that means around the age of 18, or something like that, right? Something to that effect. It's definitely more than 13, because they still like to play when they're teenagers. So there's no problem with that, because for them, it's like, they're enjoying Shabbat like that. But for old timers like me, what am I enjoying? Running around like a crazy man, like a madman. I think I enjoy that. So that's already something else. So that's the way it goes, You get the point. Okay. Good. That's the Mishnah Berurah. Very nice. So yeah, he explained it very nicely. All right, there you go. So now he goes on, right? The Ramah here a little bit more. There's a little bit more here. Says the Ramah, "Ve'im hiniach eruv mutar letaltel ulotzi kol sheyesh lo torat kli." Right. So it says, but if there's an eruv there, so then you can even carry something, which has totally no need. As long as what? He says, as long as it's considered to be some kind of a utensil. As opposed to what? Like a stone, right? Is a stone a utensil? It's not. So therefore, right, you shouldn't carry a stone, even if you have an eruv. It's not for the needs of the day. Cloud, right? Yeah. So, by the way, we already said in the Beit Yosef, right? What's the reason why you shouldn't carry a stone? Because it's exertion, So, you don't want to exert yourself too much, for no reason. It's not allowed. So that's the reason why we tell you not to do it. Okay, very good. So I guess we'll stop there. B'ezras Hashem, we'll pick it up next time. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Right? Yeah. So B'ezras Hashem, we'll see you tomorrow. Chazak Baruch, Laila Tov. It's something funny, right? I'm telling you guys something, very ironic and funny, right? You remember a couple of months ago, right? There was some politicians, who were announcing, right, that Bibi should resign. He's a bad boy, right? So, it seems like, the hand of God has now turned it around, right? Now they're telling him to resign, right? The Biden, he's the one who was trying to get Bibi to resign. Hashem turned it around and put it on his head. That's what you see, right, from Hashem, right? That's what the Americans say. What goes around comes around. Now they're asking him to resign. So that's what you see. All right, very good. So we'll see you next time. B'ezras Hashem. Laila Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God bless.
Thank you so much.
All right.